So good afternoon, well, good morning. It's still morning time. How's everyone doing? Good, good. Look, my name is Keith Lamont McMillan, and I'm actually with Jackson State University, and I work with, well, we're funded by the Mississippi Office of Highway Safety. So ideally, we talk to young people about safe driving practices, about seatbelt safety, speeding, and stuff like that, right? But we're not going to have that particular conversation today. We will be, guys, on the 7th of July. But today we are having a cultural day in which we're learning about civil rights history here in Mississippi. And we're also learning, most importantly, how young people were a part of that movement and how you can be a part of social change. And so to guide this particular conversation today, we have with us Dr. Daphne Chamberlain. Okay, and we're gonna go ahead and give her a hand as she comes and gets the mic. But Daphne Chamberlain will be guiding this particular conversation with us for the next couple of minutes. And we hope that you guys will benefit and learn a great deal on today. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan, and thank you all for being here. Again, thank you to the Institute for Social Justice and Race Relations here at Jackson University for the invitation to be here. It's great to be back at home here at the COFO Civil Rights Education Center. This was my baby for a couple of years, but I could not have done it without a team of people like Keith McMillan and so many others, especially those who are part of the Fannie Lou Hamer National Institute for Citizenship and Democracy. But I'm here today because my research focuses in on children's participation in the civil rights movement. So by showing how many of you all sitting in the room, because I know I have a virtual audience that I have to cater to as well, how many of you knew that children were involved in the civil rights movement by show of hands? Okay. And of course, if you've been to the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum, you've seen so many images of kids your age who were actively involved, but they weren't just involved in the movement. Guess what? They were also leaders in the movement. So part of this conversation today is not just to think about what's going on in the world around you, because there are a lot of issues, right, that we're dealing with, especially young Black men, right? You're shaking heads. So it's a lot of issues that we're having to deal with. And I have a young Black son that I have to make sure he's learning the same things that you all are learning so that he can have these strategies for survival. But ultimately, I want you all to be proud that you're learning today, understanding that young people have power in their voices, but at the end of the day, young people are capable of being leaders. So if you're a leader, just raise your hand. If you are a leader and not a follower, raise your hand. Okay, you're a leader too, raise your hand. You can be a leader. You have to have the confidence in yourself to be a leader. So that's what I want you all to take away, is in learning about these young people who were actively involved in the civil rights movement. So I teach history, even though I'm in administration, but I teach history at historic Tougaloo College, and that's where I went to school. And my first history lessons, I learned them at home, and that's the reason why I love history as much as I do. But when I got to Tougaloo, all of these doors opened up when I started learning more about how college students were involved in the civil rights. So I'm gonna take you through this history lesson first, but I'm gonna ask you, what do you all know about the civil rights movement based on what you've learned in the classroom? Just raise your hand if you wanna answer the question. Yes, sir. What do you know about the civil rights movement?
The civil rights movement was a movement of Black people that tried to get freedom and be equal to white people.
So this young man, what's your name? Bruce, said that the civil rights movement was a movement when Black people were fighting to get their freedom and also get equal rights and be equal to whites. Anybody else want to say, who are some of the people you know about in the civil rights movement? Who are some of, you know, some of the names, some people who are involved in the movement? Tag somebody, tag your friend back here. Fannie Lou Hamer was somebody in the movement. Yes, sir. Medgar Evers was somebody in the movement.
Martin Luther King.
Martin Luther King was somebody in the movement.
Rosa Parks.
Rosa Parks. Oh, so he took yours too. So think about that. How many of you have heard of White Ed Hawkins? Show me your hands. White Ed Hawkins. How many of you have heard of Jughead Young? How many of you have heard of Coley Liddell? You know these people. How many of you have heard of Amos Brown? How many of you have heard of Hezekiah Watkins? So there should be some hands up on that one because Mr. Watkins speaks regularly at the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum. But you see how all of those names that I called, there were no hands up for a lot of those people. And that's one of the things that's often being taught in classrooms. It's what us, the historians and scholars, call the master narrative. Narrative is these same people and over again, like Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and yes, sir. Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks. And then of course, it also adds these other voices saying that they were the ones who were responsible for the successes of the movement. But when we think about this, really it was young people your age and the people in these local communities who were doing the work in the movement. So when we were on the tour today, one of the things I shared with you all is that there's this common theme or this thread that runs throughout the civil rights movement. So people were fighting for what? Freedom. Black folks were fighting for freedom. And there's a quote even in one of the exhibit pieces here that says, "My freedom is entangled with the freedom of every other man. So if another man is not free, then I am not free." So just think about how the statement is for somebody to say, "I'm not free unless everybody is free." And we'll have something at the very end to close us out that I want you all to get engaged in because I want to hear everybody's collective voice. But think about that. I'm not free unless other people are free. So freedom is really important. And historically for Blacks in this country, we've always been fighting for freedom. Freedom has been something that's been really important. And this is like your classic definition of freedom. If you are a dictionary and look, this is what you will see. The condition of being free, political independence, possession of civil rights, ease of movement, frankness or boldness, unrestricted use of access. So when we talk about freedom, Black people were defining freedom in a number of ways after slavery because they had nothing under the institution of slavery, right? So they were able to get an education. They were able to move around as they wanted to without somebody having to tell them that they could and couldn't go. They were able to get voting rights. They were also able to own land, which was an investment. They were also able to find their family members who had been torn apart due to the institution of slavery. So despite the fact that all they had was freedom, they were defining freedom in their own way. So just think about that, what freedom means to you right now in 2022 as young boys who are between the ages of 7 and 17, and just collectively for everybody sitting in this room, because we already know what the issues are that we're faced with in this country. So think about what freedom really means and how we're constantly in this struggle to obtain it. Now, here's where the lesson comes in learning about children. Children have always been historical actors and always been activists. There's one of the first research projects I did in college was on something called the Children's Crusade. And it started in the medieval period in Europe. Can you all believe that there were kids in Europe who were leading marches? And these were like holy crusades. But then when we fast forward here to the United States, children were also actively involved in the civil rights movement. So I'm going to take you all through a timeline that's really quick, but I want you to raise your hand if you've seen some of these images or even know some of them or familiar with the topic. So this is Birmingham, Alabama, May 2nd, 1963. This was where you had thousands of young people in Birmingham who were involved in what was known as the Birmingham Children's Crusade. And these were children who were acting on their own Many of them from middle-class families whose parents said, no, I don't want you to be involved, but they still got involved anyway. And of course, they were paying attention to what was going on. So it's important for you all to watch the news to see what's going on right here in Jackson, but also what's going on around the country. They were paying attention to the fact that downtown businesses in Birmingham were not allowing their parents to come in and make purchases or even being treated as human beings or with respect. How many of you have seen this image? Does anybody know the name of this little girl? Yes, sir.
I don't remember her name, but I remember seeing an image like this, and she had to be followed around in school because people were threats to her.
Okay, she had been followed around in school, so she integrated by guards, right, by these federal guards. Of course, she and her family received death threats, but this is New Orleans, but let me see who knows her name. You forgot her name, so let's see if one of your friends knows. What's her name?
Sister Dorothea.
Not Sister Dorothea. Let's see.
Ruby Bridges.
Ruby Bridges. Let's give this gentleman a hand. So that's what teamwork does. Teamwork makes the dream work, right? So we got to it. So this was a young girl who was integrating a school in New Orleans, Louisiana, and of course that was 14th to 1960. So what we're doing is going backwards. We started with 1963, right? And this is 1960. Even though this image isn't clear, you know what these students are called? Yes, sir. You know what? The Little Rock Nine. So let's give this gentleman a hand. September 4th, 1957. These 9 young people integrated Rock High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. And think about what happened as a result. Let me tell you how mean people can be. Because these young people were the chosen ones, and oftentimes we step into positions where we don't think we're chosen, but we are chosen. And that is our mission, our calling. These were the called. And that following year, as a result of these young people integrating Little Rock High School, guess what the governor said? No schools are gonna be open. So that's how mean people are as a result of Black children trying to get an education and their Black parents wanting them to get an education. So just think about that, how brave, but they were also leaders and also people who could influence others despite some of the trauma that they experienced. But that's Little Rock, Arkansas, 1957. So Montgomery, Alabama. Somebody mentioned Rosa Parks. That happened in December 1955. But what's the date up there? March 2nd, 1955. That's a young lady by the name of Claudette Colvin. So all these months before Rosa Parks, you had a 15-year-old girl who sat down on a bus and refused to give up her seat. You know that person? So Claudette Colvin, I mean, she made history, right? But guess what? The history books won't tell you about that young lady for a couple of different reasons. But guess what? I'm a woman, and I am absolutely unequivocally a womanist. The reason why those buses were integrated was because of women. So because of this young girl, because of Rosa Parks, but nobody even talks about the court case that had 9 other Black women who were a part of it. So I think that that's important for us to understand that women were important, but ultimately I want you all to understand that kids were important in making this movement happen. So even though this was a major court case, it was about, and this is the Brown decision, May 17th of 1954. And what did the Brown decision do? It helped kids get a better education. And what happened in that court?
They desegregated all the schools.
And this court case desegregated all the schools. Let's give these 2 young men a hand clap. So with that said, this important court case around children's education and access. And y'all, we're still in this fight. when you think about Jackson Public Schools, when you think about other schools, and when you think about funding, just a couple of years ago, you all may not know this because you were babies at the time, many of you, but there was this campaign to try to increase funding for Mississippi schools. And that started right down the street in the Masonic Temple with young people who were leading the charge. So think about all of these things that we're talking about 50, 60 years ago are all today as you're learning this history. But when we even roll it further back, we can say 1946 in Jackson, Mississippi. There was a Lanier High School bus boycott, and there have been like several dates that are attached to this bus boycott, but it happened in 1946. And there was a young man at Lanier High School who refused to give up his seat to a white passenger who wanted to get on this city bus, and it started a bus boycott that lasted for a couple of weeks. And of course, these were high school students who were committed to changing how they were treated on those buses. But that's right here in 1946. So even before Rosa Parks, even before Claudette, you had Elport Chest and the other students at Lanier High School. So because you all are from Jackson, many of you, my focus is going to be on Jackson and a lot of what happened right here in this community. Anybody grew up in West Jackson? By show of hands. What school do you go to? You go to Casey. Okay. Northwest Middle School. Okay, my brothers went to school there. I think there's somebody. Yes, sir. And you're in Byram. Okay. So there are some high schools here that have a lot of history. I just mentioned Lanier. Jim Hill is another one. But when we think about even churches as important places where we get some important, not just religious lessons, but also some social lessons, College Hill Baptist Church, located right here in this community, is where one of the first NAACP youth councils was started. And everybody's hand ought to go up when I say Medgar Evers. How many of you know who Medgar Wiley Evers is? Medgar Evers, when he became the first full-time field secretary in Mississippi, he believed in young people. And one of the things that he said to all of the chapters across the state was, in order for your leadership not to die, you have to make sure that you are training the next group, the next generation of young leaders. So it was important to have young people like this that you see in front of you. I don't see anybody with braces, and y'all probably didn't have those issues like I did. But this is my orthodontist, Theodore Jones. These two sisters, their father ended up becoming the president of the Jackson NAACP. And this is Amos Brown right here. And of course, the other two, this is Amos Brown right here on the very end. And the other two, I'm still working to identify. I think I know who they are. But Amos Brown, I'm gonna focus in on him because he went to Jim Hill High School, was so outspoken, and he found a mentor in Medgar Evers. So again, remember what I was saying, that there was an adult who believed in young people. There are adults sitting in this room who believe in you and who believe in your potential. But Amos Brown was so outspoken that when he left the state of Mississippi, he was getting in front of the newspaper press and saying, the food is not good at the school, the books are horrible, the schools are dilapidated, and we need some money to be able to fund better schools here in the city of Jackson for colored students or Black students. And because he was so outspoken, there were these attacks on him and his family. And Medgar Evers made the case that, of course, if you don't allow this young man to go to Jim Hill because he was waiting to go to school that fall, what we're gonna do is integrate Provine High School. So that was 1956. Provine right over here. So they allowed him to come into school. Some of y'all who are about to go to high school were probably happy about being able to participate in sports, band, being considered valedictorian or salutatorian. All of that stuff was taken away from him because they said he was an influencer in his school and they didn't want the bad behavior to rub off on other young people. But what that quote unquote bad behavior led to is the fact he became a leader before there was a full out civil rights movement here in Jackson, Mississippi. And you can't see the top because of the Zoom bar, but there were all of these reports. There was this, just like the FBI, that was even doing investigations of kids. They were going into their bank accounts, following them and seeing what their parents were doing. And one of the reports said that this young man was a full-fledged agitator. So you're talking about somebody who was close in age to you, who was simply fighting for the rights of his peers, as well as parents and others in the community. But they labeled him as an agitator. But he was really a freedom fighter. Remember, I'm gonna keep saying freedom over and over again. In Jackson, March 27, that's supposed to be March 27, 1961, we passed the building where the Tougaloo 9 staged a read-in. There were not adequate reading materials in the colored library. So these young people who were mentored by Medgar Evers, who he believed in, decided that they would stage a read-in. They went into the library, extremely respectful, well-dressed, well-mannered, making requests, sitting down, not bothering anybody. As a result, they were arrested and they were jailed for up to 32 hours. And that's all because they wanted to have access to reading materials that would help them be better in school or be successful in school. And these are college students. So it's not just the young kids who are involved, but also college students here in Jackson. And if you see, I got a Tougaloo 9 t-shirt on because I have to always rep my school, but also tell this history that needs to be told. June and July 19. So this timeline of what's going on in Jackson is very long, y'all. I started in 1946 and I didn't even give you the details of that one. But all of these are high school students and college students who are involved in the civil rights movement, and they are getting involved when the Freedom Riders are coming in. This here is Dolores Lynch Williams. She was a high school student. This is Jesse Harris. If you've looked out at the front desk, there is a Freedom plaque that has his name on it. He was one of the Freedom Riders, and he was a college student at Tougaloo at the time. This is Jimmy Travis. He was a student at Holy Ghost High School at the time. This face ought to be familiar because this is Hezekiah Watkins, 13 years old, arrested for his role in the Freedom Rides. This is Mary Harrison Lee, who was a longtime principal here. And if you all know Angelique Lee, if you pay attention to the city council, the councilwoman, this is her mother. And she was a student at Tougaloo College during the Freedom Rides and a part of a group called the Tougaloo 8. But all of these young people, and of course, this is Amos Brown, but all of these young people are either high school students or college students, with the youngest one being Hezekiah at age 13. Berglund High School, Macomb. So we're moving outside of Jackson now. So that tells you that students are really organizing across the state. 15-year-old Brenda Travis and others who went to integrate a Walgreens, they were arrested. They spent from August 31st to October 3rd in jail. And as a result, these students walked out of the school. Segregation must go because of a state segregated fare. Young people, again, who were at the forefront of organizing that demonstration and that protest of a segregated state fair. And this is October 1962. So all of these demonstrations to protest this massive event that was still segregated started as early as 1960, but they really did increase activism in 61. This is 62. These are political cartoons that kids were drawing to let the community know what was going on. And if you can't read this one, it says you can't boycott the state fair. And it has these police officers and dogs. And down here it says these kids are in jail. Is this Southern hospitality? So that's critical thinking for you to be able to pull all of that together as a high school student and put this in a publication that will go out to everybody in the Black community to get folks to support this boycott of the state fair. And guess what? By 1963, the state fair had integrated. So that's a short period of time where young people were involved. May 28th, 63, this is Woolworth sit-in, and all of these are Tougaloo College students, and this is a Tougaloo College faculty member. And these are the livestock pens. So after May 28th, you had high school students at Lanier, Brinkley, and Holy Ghost High School who decided that they were going to stage a walkout. So all of these kids across these schools said, we're going to walk out. And they're walking out because there's an economic boycott going on in downtown Jackson because parents can't go in for something as simple. If you're a sneakerhead, I love to buy shoes. I love sneakers. You couldn't even try shoes on when you went into the store. Your parents had to draw an outline of your foot. So that's how serious this thing was. But Black people were spending their money in these businesses where they couldn't get respect. So I know you probably heard respect my Black dollars. This is something that's been more current, but this is where this is coming from. And these boycotts were extremely important and they were powerful because it ultimately changed how things were happening. But when those kids were walking out of those schools, this is where they were placed. So you see the irony in it, the place you're supposed to go and have fun ends up becoming a place where, because that becomes a makeshift jail. And it also becomes known as a concentration camp. And right down the street, the youngest of them all, or one of the youngest, is 12-year-old Gene Jughead Young, whose name I mentioned earlier. And he talked about freedom in an interview that I did with him. But of course, it's also on something called Voices of Civil Rights. And he said he didn't know what freedom was, but he felt like freedom was the best thing that had to be fought for and gained for Black folks. And this young man ended up going on and becoming a leader, went to Jackson State. When the shootings happened in 1970, he was the one who kind of calmed everybody down. But he continued to do this work and also tell this story up until his death. Now, can I get a volunteer who can read this? Volunteer. Okay, you come up here with me. And I titled this talk, Fight on Little Children, for a reason. So I want you to read this poem. And this poem was written in 1964 at a Macomb Freedom School. There you go.
Fight on little children, fight on you. Fight on you. Know what you're doing is right. Don't stop. Keep straight ahead. You're just about to win the fight. Many hardships, there will be many trails you have to face, but go on, children, keep fighting. Soon freedom will take hardship place. Sometimes it's going too hard to be hard. Sometimes the lights will look, but keep it up. Don't get discouraged. Keep fighting through Jesus seems slim. And the end you and I know that one day the facts they'll face and realize we're human to that freedom taking slavery place.
Let's give Jacob a hand. Great job, Jacob. Jacob, you did a great job. Thank you for volunteering. That's what a leader does. You volunteer, even though you might be scared. But that's the reason why this whole talk is called Fight On Little Children, Fight On. Because what we had going on from the 1940s and even before that up until the 1960s It was young people your age who were getting out on the streets and being extremely courageous when there were adults who were afraid to get out and do the work. And the one thing about those young people, and I want you all to think about this, you have to be selfless in the service that you give, and you have to sometimes be selfless when it comes to being a leader. So it's extremely important that it's not always about you. You have to think about others and future generations who will be benefiting from the work that you do. And this is what's going on right now. So despite the fact that we've talked about all these children who are involved in these different moments in time through history, there's still work that has to be done, and you all are the ones that are leading this work. So again, I encourage you all to fight the good fight and fight on, little children, fight on. So as we close out, Keith, Mr. McMillan, do you mind helping me out, sir? Fannie Lou Hamer is one of the names that was mentioned earlier. And I told you all this quote, my freedom is entangled with the freedom of every other man. And there was a sign that I showed early on that had something about if a child is not free, nobody is free. Fannie Lou Hamer in 1962, made this statement. She said, nobody is free until everybody's free. So a few years ago, we had some students in a summer workshop. They made up the beat and everything. We're gonna make up the beat for you, but what you want, we want you to get involved. So Keith, you wanna lead us out, just give them what it sounds like so they can say it. And this will help y'all wake up because the food is here. The food is here. So this will help you wake up. But I mean, I want y'all to say this like you mean it and like your life depends on it. Because we are all in this thing together. So to everybody's free. That's it. Yeah.
Nobody's free till everybody's free. Nobody's free till everybody's free.
So when you get it, stand up and say it. Everybody's free till everybody's free. Till everybody's free. Nobody's free till everybody's free. Stand up when you get it. Till everybody's free. Nobody. Till everybody's free. Till everybody's free. Till everybody's free. Nobody's free. Y'all gotta say it like you mean it. Because we gotta be the ones to secure our freedom. We can't wait on anybody else. Nobody's free till everybody's free. Nobody's free till everybody's free. Nobody's free till everybody. Everybody's free till everybody's free. Fight on, little children, fight on. So thank you so much for that information, Dr. Chamberlain. And so let me see, I'm trying to see if we have anyone either in the room or in our room. Nobody's free till everybody's free. Thank you, Dr. McDaniels. Do we have any questions or comments from anybody? And just to let you, the virtual world know that we have more than about 20 to 21 young people right here from the city of Jackson. Randy, who's the youngest person? How old are you? 8. Who's the oldest person? Yes. How old are you? 18. So we have the youngest person from 8 to 18 that's currently right now in the COCO building, listening live to this particular conversation. So this has really been a powerful conversation. And we have a question coming from the floor. And if you would, stand up and give us your name loudly so that they can hear you and so that everyone else can hear you as well.
My name is Tori Tiff. I was wondering why the Masonic Temple was closed.
Why did the Masonic Temple was closed down?
What period of time? You have a year?
Like, why is it closed now?
Oh, okay. Okay, so you know it's open because the NAACP office is located. So that's one of the things that when we go on the walking tour is how important the Masons were to the civil rights movement because Mary Evans was a Mason. The NAACP Mississippi office, conference office is located on the 2nd floor. And you know, it doesn't look like there's a lot of activity there. When they have Masonic meetings, that's where they go. When they're NAACP, because of COVID, you don't see a whole lot of activity. But it's open and we'll see if we can go inside this afternoon so you can see the space yourself and also see where Mary Evans' office is located. Thank you.
you, Dr. Chamberlain. I have wonderful questions. This is from the chat. This is from Dr. Michael Gates. And he asks, what are some ways we can encourage and inspire our youth of today to be as civically engaged as the youth presentation?
Okay, and I don't know if Dr. Gates can hear me. Okay, so I think one of the biggest things, and I'm talking to the children, the students, the young people in this room, but I'm also talking to the adults. I'm not a political person, but I'm about to make a political statement. We do not teach critical race theory in Mississippi's K-12 schools. But in order to get young people like those sitting in here and those who may be virtual, engaged and involved in community work, because it is community work. It's freedom work. It's work that you have to love doing it because you love yourself, but you love your people. It's important that we make sure this history is told, because everybody's not going to tell the history. You're not always going to get it in a textbook. But we also have to make sure that our children are really paying attention to what's going on in the news, in the local community. And we have to teach them these survival strategies. Unfortunately for us, we've been doing this since the institution of slavery. But we have to make sure that they understand who they are and make sure we instill confidence in them, make sure that they understand that they are competent, that they are capable, and they can do whatever they want in this world. But at the end of the day, when we are engaging them in these conversations and making sure they understand what's going on in the world and what their position is in the world, because they are all leaders, I think that that's something that they will embrace and then go forth and be able to bring about some of this systemic change. But the voices of young people are really important, despite the fact that young people are quiet in many spaces, but you all got all of these examples of where young people stepped up to the forefront and were not just these actors, they were actually leading many of these events that were taking place in Jackson, but all across the South. Thanks, Dr. Gates.
Thank you so much. My question is, what are some of the stereotypes people have when it comes to children's participation in the civil rights movement? Because usually, I feel like sometimes when you think about civil rights, it's like high school stuff. But you exemplify elementary students who are participating as well. So what are some of the things that people think when they get the children participation or student participation, but may not be quite accurate or need to be expanded on?
Well, one of the things, sometimes when you say youth activism, youth is like a fine line. And youth can mean from the youngest to, of course, college age students. So that's one of the things. So even in my research, I have to say children, because that even makes it kind of puts an age bracket on it. And I specifically look at children between the ages of 7 and 18 because they are still children. But when you talk about these stereotypes or even just the backlash from within the civil rights movement, here in Jackson, and I make this case, Jackson set a precedent for youth activism all across the South. And I say that because Martin Luther King was really not supportive of young people getting involved in the movement because of these threats of what could happen. Malcolm X said, and he even critiqued Martin Luther King after the Children's Crusade in Birmingham. He said, real men don't put their children on the firing line. Robert F. Kennedy had something to say about kids being involved in the movement. Even when he saw young people like Amos Brown and what they were doing to engage other young people and influence and also get other young people to be actively involved, he saw there had to be something in youth activism, which made it important to groom the next generation of Black leaders to be able to change things for the Black community. But ultimately what happened here in Jackson, because James Bevel with SCLC was able to come in and see that kids were asking questions and wanting to get involved, he took that same model from Birmingham. And people don't really talk about that much. We often see Birmingham because that's what got the most media attention. And the media has its own way of spinning things too. But Jackson really was important in a strategic kind of way in how young people were involved. But young people were involved all across the South and across a long range of years, what we call the long civil rights movement. Thank you.
I have a couple of comments from our chat virtually. Ms. Ashley McPherson says, great to see you involved in positive activity, also knowing their history as well. Jean Lee says, I learned the history from the lecture. Woodward says, I also have 2 children here watching with me, ages 7 and 9, and they really are enjoying this. And it's important to me that they hear this information. We have a comment from Jennifer Young Wallace who says that I can understand both perspectives when it comes to children. And then we also have another question from Jean Lee. Now, I have a question. If you lived in China, like in 1989, young college students in Tiananmen Square protest and they fight as non-violent, ended up with a massacre. So under this background, it is good for people to, encourage kids and young people to die for freedom?
That's a great question. And when you think about some of the people who made the ultimate sacrifice for this thing called freedom, Medgar Evers was one of those people, but that's an adult. But let me take it back for you, so you can understand why these young people got involved in the movement. August 1955, Emmett Till was brutally murdered here in Mississippi in the Delta. And even though that placed a lot of fear in the hearts of Black Mississippi and all across, and also fear was in the minds of and on the hearts of parents who were just trying to protect their kids so they could live to see another day. But this was also what encouraged and inspired a lot of young people to get involved. And they're known as the Emmett Till generation. So think about that. September 15th, 1963, there were 4 little girls killed in the 16th Street Baptist Church. And there are these arguments that people were making at that time that the reason these 4 little girls were killed was because of all that activism that took place in May of 1963 in Birmingham during the Children's Crusade. So I think what's important when we have these conversations today, y'all, I watched this video where there was this 13-year-old girl, I can't think of where it was, but she was questioning city council and asking, if you're the adults and the decision makers, you all aren't the smart ones. And she was speaking with sage wisdom. I had never heard a 13-year-old speak like that before, but it was powerful and impactful, and all they could do was listen because she was telling the truth. But when you talk about the loss of life and the loss of children's lives, even when they're not active in the movements, we're losing Black children anyway right now. Tamir Rice was 12 years old. Trayvon Martin. Just think about all of it, and there's so many more we don't even know about. We just had one here in Jackson recently, and I can't remember how, because I've tried to turn off the news because I get heavily burdened by some of what I hear. But we have to teach our young people how to not be docile and speak up for themselves. But when we as adults have a responsibility too, to protect our children. But when we talk about loss of life, the loss of life has always been happening for African Americans and African American children. But we have to be prepared for that. But I think that as adults, our responsibility as a community is to protect the children, even in these moments where they're actively on the front lines of protest.
So Dr. Chamberlain, we have one of the sponsors or the director of this particular camp, and he would just like to share a few things about who this group is and what you guys are doing over the course of the next couple of weeks.
I really have a question first.
Okay.
So my name is Samuel West, and we are here representing the men of Arden Camp, Mississippi, and excited about being here. You've done a great job. But my question is, a lot of the young men know the history. Maybe not the names and places, the dates, but they got a good idea about the history and what has transpired. but they relate more closely to the Black Lives Movement than our history. Can you help me as we go through a 7-week period of Black history, Bible, and math tutorial, reading tutorial, we do all the different sports at our camp. We teach the fundamentals and the importance of fundamentals, and we teach conflict resolution, etiquette. We try to do all of that. Can you help me relate our past to our present and how I can better impact this group?
Black Lives Matter. That's always been a conversation that we've been having. We just didn't have a name to it. And I often have to try to give a disclaimer, especially when I'm in the classroom and showing images. When we talk about the act of lynching, Black men, but also Black women were lynched. And one of the things that we would often have happen is those who were the victims became those who were the blamed. And then that resulted in a loss of life. And then also several allegations. And also these stereotypes, and we talk about mobility as being this definition of freedom. But all of this is still tied to the Black Lives Matter movement, because when we talk about Trayvon Martin, movement, freedom meant movement for those coming out of slavery. But this is a Black man Black boy who couldn't even walk through a neighborhood. So that means Black folks' mobility is restricted in a moment like that, where he ended up losing his life as a result of racism. So all of this is tied. It's easy to make some ties between the past and present. And Black Lives Matter movement, of course, that is what you all most identify with. But this is a conversation that has been happening for a much longer period of time. There was just not a name with it. And these images right here, it's about protecting and preserving Black life, but also bringing about an understanding that humanity and human dignity is what people deserve as well. So I'll be happy to continue working with you all in whatever ways I can to support you all, because this has been a great group. Any other questions? So I don't want to stand between you all and the food, but thank you all for being here.
I have a question. This is Jennifer Wallace.
There was one person who has a question on Zoom.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I really did enjoy the part that I heard. I'm very interested in Black history and the movement and all those things that have taken place, especially with critical race theory being a very big issue in America now, being an educator myself and not understanding the hypocrisy in teaching critical race theory, those against critical race theory, and then those who still support certain organizations that surely I would say impact racism. But my question to you is, will you all have more of these? I think that is very much needed, and I would like to get on a mailing list in that regard so that I would know when you all are having more sessions like this.
Thank you, Dr. Young Wallace. Mr. McMillan is about to put some information in the chat.
Email address, and so just have her to send us her email address, and we'll keep her informed.
Okay, Mr. McMillan just said that he'll put the email address to the Institute in the chat, and for anyone who is interested, please email, and they will make sure that you're added to the mailing list to be informed of this event and so many others that will be hosted by the Jackson State Institute for Social Justice and Race Relations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and you know how to reach me too as well.
Oh, I will be contacting you because I have some ideas, and I actually am working on something. Well, something has been brewing in my spirit, as my grandmother says, in regards to moving forward. So I'll give you a call. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think we have one more comment from Brother David Payton, representing the Alphas. Just want to say good afternoon. Very interesting. I truly enjoyed myself talking to Skip Robinson Museum tour. I'm from Jersey City, so I don't have, Jackson, it's not home, but just learning about the different things that are going on historically in Jackson. And again, the follow-up with Dr. Chamberlain, this forum has been very enlightening to me, and I'm inspired to see how I can help to inspire people as well. So on behalf of Daphne Chamberlain chapter, which is based here in Jackson, we appreciate it, and we want to definitely support the efforts. Thank you. And so at this time, we're going to go ahead and conclude this particular session. Any more comments from anybody? We really do appreciate you all in today. And again, so this is not over with. We still have a few more things to do after this virtual session. But now we're going to go ahead and conclude our virtual conversation. And so we're going to go ahead and end this. But thank you guys for joining in, for the many who joined in virtually. And thank you for this room that is filled up with these young men. And that was the other thing that we really just mentioned, that everybody, the majority of the people that's in this space are young men. And so we definitely thank you guys for being here. And so this is going to conclude today's session. Join us on Thursday for another conversation and that's going to be Dr. Daniel Black in the virtual chat. So feel free to make sure you register for that. But that's all that we have for today. Thank you guys for showing up. Thank you guys for coming. And we appreciate you being here.